Saint of the Day. April 13th. Saint Martin I. 74th Pope. Born, June 21, 598. Near Todi, Umbria, Roman Empire. Died, September 16, 655, aged 57. Cherson, Roman Empire. Venerated in Roman Catholic Church, Eastern Orthodox Church. Feast, April 13th. Pope Martin I reigned from July 21, 649 to his death in 655. He succeeded Pope Theodore I on July 5, 649. The soul of the new pope had to be great to face the great difficulties of the times. To save the Church in the East, he condemned monothelism, which claimed Christ had only one will. He was the only pope during the Eastern Roman domination of the papacy whose election was not approved by an ISEO from Constantinople. Martin I was exiled by Emperor Constans II and died at Cherson. He is considered a saint and martyr by the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church. He was born near Todi, Umbria, in the place now named after him. According to his biographer Theodore, Martin was of noble birth, of commanding intelligence, and of great charity to the poor. Piazza states that he belonged to the order of Saint Basil. He had acted as papal apocrisiarius or legate at Constantinople and was held in high repute for his learning and virtue. Martin I was the last Constantinopolitan apocrisiarius to be elected pope. Other envoys under the title nuncio have been elected since then, like John XXIII. In 641, Pope John IV sent the abbot Martin into Dalmatia and Istria with large sums of money to alleviate the distress of the inhabitants and redeem captives seized during the invasion of the Slavs. As the ruined churches could not be rebuilt, the relics of some of the more important Dalmatian saints were brought to Rome, where John then erected an oratory in their honor. Shortly after, Emperor Constans II, who was a monotheist, ordered his agents to kidnap the Pope. They took Pope Martin and brought him by ship to stand before the emperor at Constantinople. The Pope suffered enormously during the voyage and arrived in Constantinople very weak. There he was held in a filthy, freezing cell in a prison for 3 months. Finally, in handcuffs, he was dragged before a tribunal, and under the depositions of false witnesses, he was condemned to death as a traitor and heretic. After the sentence was read, he was taken to a terrace of the palace near the imperial stables where a multitude was gathered. The judge who had presided at the tribunal approached Saint Martin and mocked him, "You see how God delivered you into our hands. You were against the emperor, and thus has God abandoned you." Then the soldiers slashed his clothing and took away his shoes. He was delivered to the prefect of the city with the order of execution. The judge tried to incite the populace to anathematize Saint Martin, but the mob remained silent, gazing at the ground, with the exception of some 20 people who followed the order. After a while, the crowd dispersed. The soldiers stripped the Pope of his shredded clothes and dressed him in a grotesque tunic, open on both sides, to humiliate him. They put an iron ring around his neck with a rope attached to it and dragged him to a prison of common criminals. In the freezing cold, Saint Martin trembled and awaited death. But at the last moment, his death was commuted to life imprisonment. In Crimea, where he was exiled, his suffering increased daily until the Creator called his soul in 655. Pope Martin left praiseworthy letters, full of wisdom, as well as his answers to the tribunal, written in a noble and sublime style, worthy of the majesty of the Apostolic See. Comments. There are various aspects of this martyrdom that are very instructive to us. First, the extreme respectability of Pope Saint Martin and the special form of torment to which he was subjected. He was a saint and, therefore, aware of the supreme dignity of the pontifical throne. He knew it was the highest dignity on earth. The dignity of any king or emperor cannot be compared to the dignity of the Vicar of Christ, to whom our Lord gave the keys of heaven and earth. Further, Saint Martin was a man of a noble spirit. The selection allows us to see that he was very intelligent and highly educated. His letters reflected a noble and elevated spirit. He loved what is high and sublime. Second, he was exposed to one of the worst humiliations a pope had to suffer since the beginning of the Church. We know that Saint Peter was crucified, but few popes suffered martyrdom as terrible as that of Saint Martin. The Roman pontiff, who knew he was the legitimate representative of our Lord, was badly treated during his trip. When he arrived in Constantinople, he was kept in cruel confinement for 3 months before he was dragged before a court of monotheist heretics. The tribunal was already prepared to condemn him. After the condemnation, he was dressed in ridiculous apparel with an iron ring placed on his neck, as if he were an animal to be pulled here and there by a rope at their pleasure. He was mocked by the judge, who, far from being an impartial man, instigated the multitude to laugh at and condemn the sovereign pontiff. Next, he was dragged barefoot to a prison of common criminals. We can see the humiliation this represented for a man who respected himself. Further, it was intensely cold and he was trembling. Some bystanders could possibly interpret his trembling as a symptom of fear and have laughed at him. Finally, he was condemned to exile in Crimea. He died there as a consequence of such bad treatment. For this reason, the Church considers him a martyr. He faced the worst public ordeals, such as the questioning before the emperor and the judge, with panache, and gave the answers that should be given. In the end, he did not compromise. It is a noble example of fortitude. Third, the cruelty of Emperor Constans II and the monotheist heretics who surrounded him is notable. The emperor committed an unspeakable crime practiced in the presence of all the people. An emperor who exposes the pope to public humiliation commits a sacrilege and brings the curse of God over the empire. He and his sycophant, the judge, had planned that the people should laugh at the pope and anathematize him. Even though they were bad people, they did not do this. The people remained silent and walked away. If they had been faithful, they would have risen in indignation and liberated the Pope from that outrage. The fact that they did not do this reveals the stage of decadence into which they had fallen. Fourth, this episode also points to the centuries of rivalry that existed between Constantinople and Rome, the two largest cities in the world. This rivalry would lead to the schism in the 11th century and the establishment of the schismatic church, which is called schismatic by a kind of historical condescendence since it had always been heretical. I read the report of a witness present in Constantinople when it was taken by the Turks in the 15th century. This man observed that the heretical people of Constantinople were literally terrified by the bloody invasion of the Turks. He noted, however, that if those people were to be given the alternative of returning to the Catholic faith in order to stop the invasion, they would prefer to continue in the heresy and be destroyed by the Turks. That is, among them, there was such blind hatred toward the truth that nothing else mattered. We see the fanaticism that the enemies of the Church can have. How can we explain it? I remember a phrase of Donoso Cortés, a great Spanish thinker. He said that, without the grace of God, men normally like only partial truths, they do not like the whole truth, the universal truth. Normally men hate the whole truth more than anything else. The Catholic Church offers the total truth. This is why she is hated by so many people. They prefer any error to the whole truth. This explains why those schismatics and heretics of the 15th century hated the Church. This also explains why modernists, progressivists, communists, and others hate the universal truth. For this, they will be punished by the justice of God. These are the comments that the edifying martyrdom of Pope Saint Martin suggests. Let us ask him to give us his strength and love for the whole truth.